In last year's playoffs, Devin Booker went on one of the craziest shooting runs you'll ever see. He made over 50% of his threes, 56% of his mid-range shots, had back-to-back games against Denver where he averaged 41 points on 89% true shooting. I mean, we're talking about some video game numbers. The thing is, the run only lasted 11 games and revolved around him knocking down impossibly tough shots at a seemingly unsustainable rate. So a lot of people just chalked it up to hot shooting over a small sample. But 45 games into this season, he's taking a real similar diet of shots, yet remains incredibly efficient, which makes me wonder if we're actually just watching one of the best shot makers in NBA history. To understand why he takes so many tough shots, we've first got to look at why he doesn't get many easy ones. Of course, the easiest shots come at the rim, and despite being an aggressive attacker, he doesn't create those opportunities as much as some other primary ball handlers. When it comes to slashing, I think there are 4 major traits that the best of the best possess. The first is a tight handle. When defenses sit in your lanes or load up, how can you navigate your way to the paint without losing the ball? The other 3 are all physical tools. You've got burst, and I'm not just talking about sheer speed, but how good you are at accelerating. Sometimes a simple change of pace can get you right by a defender. Then there's length. If there's a small gap in the defense, or you get just half a step down the lane, the ability to take 1 or 2 long strides can be the difference between a layup or getting cut off completely. And finally, the last one is strength. If you do get cut off and can just go through the defender, well, all of your problems are solved. When you think of the game's best drivers, they usually check most of these boxes, and if not, are in the top tier in 1 or 2 of them. For example, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is elite at changing speeds, has an amazing handle, and is incredibly lengthy. Or how about Giannis? He might not have the handle of Shai, but best believe his combination of burst, strength, and length has turned him into a literal freight train. I think you get the idea, and all that's to say, Devin Booker doesn't have these luxuries. It's not that these categories are weaknesses, just that they aren't strengths. He doesn't have that jarring first step that can leave defenders in the dust, and he's not very lengthy, so it's tough for him to capitalize on small advantages. When extra help comes, he's not as comfortable handling the ball through tight quarters and doesn't change directions very quickly, so a lot of times you'll see him pick up his dribble early and go to a pull-up jumper. What you're looking at right here is every player in the NBA averaging at least 5 drives a game and how many times they shoot at the rim. All the way on the right, you've got the volume slashers, guys who are in non-stop attack mode and get to the basket at a high rate. Up top, you've got the kings of rim pressure. Yeah, they'll drive a lot, but they'll get there in other ways as well, separating themselves from the pack as interior scorers. And as you look towards the bottom, you'll find a conglomeration of guys who drive a lot, but don't always take it to the rack. That's where you'll find Devin Booker, only taking 3 shots at the rim per game. Now, it's worth noting that when he does get there, his touch around the basket is incredible. He's comfortable scoring through contact, has an amazing offhand, can go to a bunch of different release angles, which has helped him to over 75% shooting this season, good for the 92nd percentile. So, although he doesn't have the volume of some other guys, there aren't many better at converting. He pairs that interior finishing with some really nice outside shooting. His pull-up jumper is about as smooth as it gets. He'll get into shots off the dribble from his left or right hip while stepping back or drifting in either direction through seemingly impossible windows. He especially likes going to these shots out of the high pick and roll. Biyombo comes up near the 3-point line to take away that space, so Booker just pulls from multiple feet behind it. He also loves these shots in transition. If nobody slows his momentum by the time he crosses half court, he'll set up some absolute bombs. Over the last 3 seasons, he's hit 34% of his off-the-dribble threes, landing him in the 62nd percentile. And if you look at just this year, he's up to over 35%. It's a pretty good mark, especially when considering the degree of difficulty, but it's not quite good enough to get him to that top tier. As a result, he'd rather use the threat of his 3-point shooting as a way to create other avenues. This one starts with the high ball screen. He hesitates at the line to freeze the big before continuing his attack and gets to a mid-range jumper. I won't say the mid-range shot is frowned upon in today's NBA, but it's certainly not what it used to be. Back in 2001, just 46% of all shot attempts came either at the rim or from three, meaning that more than half were taken in the mid-range. You can see how the average shot diet changed over the years. In 2005, you had Mike D'Antoni's Suns putting an emphasis on pace and space, which sparked some change around the league for years to come, steadily increasing until you arrive in 2015 when Steph Curry and the Warriors won their first chip. From there, the growth became exponential, and before it had a chance to slow down, along came D'Antoni's Rockets, shooting threes at a never-before-seen rate. That takes us to 2020, where the league hit an all-time peak, more than 70% of all shot attempts from inside or out. Since then, it's steadied, and in 2024, we're looking at just under 69%. What was once a majority has now turned into a scarcity with the mid-range. You want to know where Booker lands? All the way down here. 45.8% of his shots come either at the rim or from three, which would be below the league's average when Shaq and Kobe were winning their second title, before Jordan ever played for the Wizards, while LeBron was just in high school. You get the picture. So, with the shot diet of Latrell Sprewell, how in the world does he have the efficiency of peak James Harden? Well, a lot of it comes down to how good he is at operating in the mid-range. This season, he's attempting just under 11 mid-range shots every 75 possessions, 7th in the NBA, and hitting almost 50% of them. That's some elite production. A lot of guys who specialize in the in-between game have preferences in how they get into their jumpers. That could be which hip they want to pull from, which direction they like to be moving in while setting their feet, but when it comes to Booker, there's no real limitation. This one starts with a drive left, and the speed at which he gets the ball up off the floor and to the apex of his release makes contesting it nearly impossible. And here's another one, except this time driving right. The entire motion is just so quick. When working with a live dribble on his left side, he can throw a hanging hesitation straight into a pull-up, or he can cross back to his right and pull up from that hip with the same sort of speed. And just as quickly as he goes from left to right, he'll go right to left. There's no taking this guy out of his comfort zone. Because he can get into his shot in so many ways, that also means any method for creating space is on the table. His go-to is contact. He's really good at getting defenders either on his hip or leaning in a specific direction, and from there he'll use his shoulder to create space. This one starts with a drive left, and as soon as his man starts backpedaling, he attacks the lower body while stepping back, which gives him a few feet of room to knock it down. And this time it's going to be a drive right. Once again, as soon as his defender backpedals, he's using his off arm as a weapon while pulling back. Just look at how much separation he creates. That might as well be a warm-up jumper. Another thing you'll see Booker do out of drives is throw the shoulder bump while jump stopping. He's got a pretty high release point, so he's able to just rise right over most defenders. A few possessions after that last one, he went back to the exact same move against DiVincenzo, except this time it's an up fake to create even more space, and that's just masterful stuff. So you've got bumps, step backs, jump stops, up fakes. He can also spin into these jumpers. I know I sound like a broken record, but look at how much separation he created. All of these tools work together as a series of counters. This one starts with an up fake, then a quick spin as he hunts for a bigger opening, which leaves him with another wide open look. It's worth noting though, that he doesn't actually need all of that space to pose a big threat. On this one he goes to the spin move, but it gets played perfectly. No sort of separation whatsoever. Yet, he still rises up in his defender's grill with some nice touch off the rim. He's one of those rare players that makes you feel like a contest just doesn't matter. Once again, it's the spin that gets defended well, and he leans back so that he can still find an angle. Those mid-air body adjustments are possible because he can still make shots while off balance. Look at the footwork on this one. He creates a lot of space, but that's still a really difficult shot due to the fact that he's almost falling out of bounds. Well, difficult for most people because the turnaround fade over his left shoulder is actually a go-to when playing out of the post. This back to the basket game is often used as a way for him to punish smaller matchups, and boy does that tough shot making really stand out. Steph's all over him on this one and actually fouls him while not giving him any space to land. He remains unfazed. The level of comfort he has taking jumpers while heavily contested or completely off balance means he kind of has unlimited access whenever he wants. If he finds himself in a bad position, he'll use his pivot to hunt for any sort of angle. He picks up his dribble in the paint with nowhere to go, and with some crafty footwork, he finds himself spinning into one of those baseline fades. A lot of these are rightfully considered bad shots, but he's so good at them that sometimes you have to ask yourself if it even matters. And that ability to just go over the top of anyone allows Booker to counter more aggressive defenses. On this one, the Hawks are in a zone, so when he goes to a quick move off the catch, there's no angle to the basket. That's where a quick hitting pull-up midi can make all the difference. This time he's spotted up in the corner and beats a hard closeout, only for a second defender to come flying in front of him, so he just shoots over him. The most important thing is that he doesn't always need good spacing. When he starts this drive, the paint is completely packed, with Jaren Jackson essentially playing middle linebacker. Being able to still get a good shot off from about 15 feet out is what separates a lot of players come playoff time. A large majority of these mid-range opportunities actually start in the high pick and roll. I talked about how quickly he can pull up, so when a big is back and drop, he'll get to an automatic jumper. Here's another example. He turns the corner on a drive and hunts for that pull-up midi, only to throw one of those up fakes with nobody left to contest. When there isn't an angle for him to quickly attack, you'll see him pause and read the situation before finding something else. He's one of the game's most patient pick and roll operators. Whenever he can't find a shot he likes, he'll keep his dribble live and hunt for any sort of space to get into one of those jumpers. Something you'll see him do quite a bit is put defenders in jail, either on his backside or one of his hips, before sidestepping into open space. Here it is again, except this time when he sidesteps, the big bites, so he hesitates before starting a drive and takes it all the way. That sort of brings us full circle, because while Devin Booker is as good as anyone in the league at making tough shots, that's not to say he doesn't still get some easy opportunities. With this current Suns roster, he's been asked to take on a lot more on-ball responsibility, essentially playing point guard, but he still spends a decent amount of time away from the ball where he's super effective. They'll run him off of screens for mid-range jumpers or threes, and he can of course hit on the move. He's also a really smart decision maker in these spots, so he can counter aggressive coverages with sharp cutting for some free points down low. It isn't just set action though. He's one of the best spot-up shooters in the NBA. Over the last 3 seasons, he's hit about 44% of his threes off the catch. We're talking about someone who you cannot leave open. And as soon as he draws a hard closeout, he's great at making reads, so he'll attack and create easy offense that way. In addition to the half-court game, he's one of the best transition scorers in the league. This season, he's 7th at 6.4 points a game, while doing so on an incredible 1.35 points per possession. Good for the 88th percentile. And when you step back and look at his game in its entirety, it's easy to see why he puts up some absurd scoring numbers. With the ball in his hands, he doesn't get to the rim too much, but capitalizes when he's there. He's got a pretty good off-the-dribble three-point game, but isn't quite launching them at the volume of the best of the best. And he's one of the greatest mid-range scorers in the NBA, capable of creating opportunities for himself in seemingly every way imaginable. Then he's got a lethal off-ball arsenal, movement and spot-up shooting, sharp cutting, and quick reads off the catch. You also sprinkle in the fact that he's elite in transition and gets to the free throw line at a high rate. That's where you start to see some nice efficiency. Right now, he's just under 62% true shooting, more than 3% ahead of the league's average, and the second highest mark of his career. Then you start to think about how he leverages that scoring into opportunities for others with how much his passing has developed, and now we're talking about one of the most valuable offensive players in the NBA. This season with him on the floor, the Suns have scored over 123 points every 100 possessions. Amazing. And with him on the bench, not quite as good, just a measly 111.8. If you throw Durant next to him, the Suns have been at an offensive rating of 125. Scorching hot. But what I think is most impressive is that they're still over 120 when Booker's out there without KD. As for KD without Book, it falls a little bit to about 118, and with neither on, well, it's probably not even worth talking about. All that's to say, don't take Devin Booker for granted just because he's breaking all the rules. With the way the league's shaped up, stars are expected to either be elite slashers or top-tier pull-up 3-point shooters. Yet, he's one of the few guys keeping that older game alive, surgically picking apart defenses in a way that not many can replicate. If you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure to drop a like, subscribe, and turn my post notifications on to be first on more content. If you're interested in my more in-depth research, make sure to check out my website and social media profiles. You can find those links in the description. Feel free to let me know down in the comments what you think of Booker. As always, I hope you all have a great day, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.